This Parsha podcast is dedicated in honor of a new baby, Ezra Pearlstein, grandson of our dear friends and neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Shimi and Jolie Bernstein. We also wish a hearty mazel tov to the proud parents, Tzvi and Sarah Tema Pearlstein. May young Ezra grow and flourish and become a beacon of light and a source of pride to his family, to the whole Jewish people, and of course, to his Creator. As you all know, these are not simple times for our brethren. We're almost 300 days into this war, and there's no end in sight. Of course, it took a terrible toll on many different fronts. We still have tens of thousands of citizens who have been evacuated from their homes in the north and the south. There's been terrible losses. So many soldiers, so many brave young men and women have died. And we're not arrogant enough to think that we could prognosticate and know what's going to happen next. We don't know what is the next shoe to drop. But nevertheless, we all heard some really heartening news yesterday. The political leader of Hamas, he was assassinated in Tehran. And the number 2 leader of Hezbollah, he was killed in Beirut. These monsters are committed. Their goal of their life is to kill as many Jews as possible. And of course, not only enemies of the Jews. This Hezbollah character was responsible for the death of the 241 Americans in the 1983 barrack bombing in Beirut. And it's a happy day. And it's a cause for celebration when the downfall of our enemy happens. I recall at the beginning of the war, a friend of mine asked me if it is okay to want to have vengeance, to want to take revenge for the unspeakable atrocities that these barbaric beasts did on October 7th. Is it okay to want revenge? Or maybe that's not appropriate. Maybe we should be the better person. Maybe we should be more forgiving. So I said then that not only is vengeance or desiring vengeance, not only is it tolerable, it's appropriate. And I even speculated that if someone does not desire vengeance, then they're not aligned, they're not synchronized with the will of God. Because the Torah tells us in many places, including in this week's Parsha, as we shall see, that God will undertake the vengeance of our people. You recall perhaps at the end of Parshas Ha'azinu chapter 32 of the Book of Devarim, which we're about to begin next week. If you read the end of chapter 32, it uses very graphic language of how the Almighty will avenge all the terrible crimes that were done to us, to his people. I will make my arrows drunk with blood, meaning the blood of our enemies, as punishment, as vengeance for all the terrible things that they did to us. He will avenge the blood of his servants. We are his servants. We are his emissaries and representatives in the world. We are his people. And there have been innumerable, unspeakable crimes that were perpetrated against us. And at the end, when it's all said and done, the Almighty will undertake our vengeance. And if this is what God does, if this sentiment of vengeance is appropriate, so to speak, for God, it's just, and it is appropriate for us. In the Avinu Malkeinu prayers that we say on the high holidays and on fast days, we ask, Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, Nikom Nikmazdam Avadecha Shafuch, take revenge for the blood of your servants that was spilled. Having an impulse for revenge, not only is it okay, not only is it tolerable, it's appropriate. And that is the will of God. And even in this week's Parsha, this is the end of the book of Numbers. We have a double Parsha, the only double Parsha of the year. And we read about a war against the Midianites who were part of the plot of Bilam to get the Jewish people to sin, and that caused the plague that claimed the lives of 24,000 Jews. What does the Almighty tell Moshe? Go make a war against them. Wage war against Midian, but that's not what God says. Nikom nikmas b'nei Yisrael. Avenge the vengeance of the Israelites, me'es ha-Midyanim, from the Midianites, and then you'll die. And the next verse, Moshe tells the Jewish people, it's time to take up arms. It's time to conscript soldiers for this war. We're going to attack Midian. And Moshe adds, this is the vengeance of God. We're going to take the vengeance of God to the Midianites. Now, it's interesting, the commentaries note, the Midrash notes, that when God instructs Moshe to avenge and attack the Midianites, he says, take the vengeance of the nation. Nekom nikras b'nei Yisrael, the Israelites, take their vengeance. And when Moshe conveys the message to the nation, Moshe says, we're going to take the vengeance of God against the Midianites. And the Midrash tells us that Moshe is arguing, Moshe is revealing to us that yes, these Midianites, they caused a terrible tragedy to happen to the Jewish people. They caused the death of 24,000 of our brethren. But nevertheless, it's also the vengeance of God that we are claiming. And Moshe adds, this is the words of the Midrash, if we were sinners, if we were idolaters, if we had repudiated the Almighty and His Torah, if we were uncircumcised like they are, the Midianites, they wouldn't have hated us. They wouldn't have pursued us. The only reason why they hate us and they pursued us and they were determined to try to destabilize us, it's only because of our commitment to God and His Torah. And yes, we have a claim against them and we have a vendetta against them, but ultimately it's also avenging the honor of God. I think Moshe is revealing to us a principle that's still true today. A lot of people wonder, well, why is there so much anti-Semitism? Why can't they just allow the Jews to have a little sliver of land and a little modicum of peace and stability and legitimacy? The truth is, the reason why they hate us is because they hate God. And the reason why they perpetrate these heinous crimes against us, the ultimate source of their enmity towards us, is because we are representatives of God in the world. We are the chosen people. And therefore, their anger and their wrath towards us, it's ultimately a manifestation of their anger and wrath towards God. They hate God, and that's why they hate us. And when the Almighty tells us to go avenge the crimes that they perpetrated, He tells us, avenge the vengeance of the Jewish people. And Moshe says, well, this is also the vengeance of God. And for us, when our enemies are still around, and they're enemies of us, and they're enemies of the Almighty, to feel a desire for revenge is okay, is encouraged. Moreover, Scripture tells us, when a righteous person witnesses vengeance, they will be joyous. They will rejoice. Psalms 58, verse 11. Yismach tzaddik. A tzaddik, a righteous person, will be joyful, will be joyous. Ki chazanakam, because he witnessed vengeance. Similarly, the Song of Devorah. After the assassination of Sisera, the Book of Judges, chapter 5, verse 31, we celebrate the downfall of our enemies, and we pray and we plead, Kain Yovdu Kalevecha Hashem. May all of your enemies fall thusly. So it's a good day. It's a happy day. We celebrate the downfall of evil. We don't show mercy to these barbarians. The Talmud tells us, if you're merciful to the cruel, you will ultimately be cruel to the merciful. May we all be granted more reasons to celebrate really soon. May we witness the defeat of our enemies. May we see the restoration of health and of security to our people. Of course, the return of the hostages safe and sound. As is to be expected, our enemies are threatening retaliation. And of course, the flights have been canceled. My friend Blake just texted me. He's in Israel. His flight back was canceled. I'm scheduled to travel to Israel August 19th. We'll see what happens by then. A lot could happen, as we know, in a couple of weeks. But let us hope and pray that we only hear good news and good tidings from our brethren in the Holy Land and from our brethren the world over. Now, once we're talking geopolitics from the Parsha, once we're deriving and deducing lessons for how to think about the current events from the Parsha, I will remind you of what else we read in the Parsha. Chapter 33, verse 50. The Almighty tells Moshe, in the plains of Moab, opposite Jericho, we are given an instruction to cross over the Jordan into the land of Canaan and to acquire the land. To acquire the land means to conquer it and to take its indigenous inhabitants and remove them. Remove them and their influences and all their idols and all their pagan gods and all their molten images and all their places of idol worship. To actually possess the land, to take possession of the land and to dispossess all the people that are there. To acquire it, to apportion it amongst the nation in the tribal system as is described in the Torah, to give out the land to the people. And then we read a warning. But if we do not properly settle the land, and we don't dispossess the current inhabitants of the land, and you want to leave some of them around, you want to leave some fifth columns around, those that you allow to remain, there'll be stings in your eyes and thorns in your side, and they will harass you in the land in which you live. And the chapter 33 ends with a very harsh warning. God says, in the event that we don't fulfill this mitzvah, this instruction of actually acquiring the land, the Almighty warns us. The plans that I have for them, for your enemies, I will do to you. This is very serious. And we know historically, one of the most difficult mitzvos for our people to fulfill historically has been this: to actually enter the land and to acquire it and to settle it completely. For some reason, it's proved to be an obstacle for our people. Read the book of Judges. They didn't do the job completely, and they suffered tremendously as a result. And the truth is, maybe this is not popular. Maybe this is a bit too spicy and controversial. Maybe this should be relegated to the Insider podcast. I don't know. But today, I think this flawed perception remains in place. The Jews, we have the land, but do we really? Are we not tolerating mortal enemies as neighbors? Now, I don't want to justify it, but we see historically it's not something that comes naturally to us. For us to actually ruthlessly acquire land as instructed to us by the Torah, it's not something that we're good at. And repeatedly, we've failed to do it. But this is what the Torah instructs us to do and warns us against ignoring. And if we ignore it, we do so at our own peril. It's a verse or a series of verses in our Parsha, and I think it's very much still true to the current state of our people in our land. I thought it would be appropriate to mention it, even though maybe it's edging closer to the territory of politics, which, as you know, I know nothing about. I could read Hebrew and understand what the verse says on a superficial level. It may be appropriate to the times that we are in today. We are in Parshas Mattos and Masei. This is the only double Parsha of the year. This year, 5784, is a leap year, and therefore we have more weeks and no double Parshios, with the exception of this one. Almost always, Parshas Mattos and Parshas Masei are together. The next time that they are separated is in the year 2035. We hope that we'll all be in good health and in great spirits in 11 years from now. But at the very end of the book, the very end of the wonderful book of Bamidbar, we read a follow-up to a story that we already addressed. And the book ends off maybe on a bit of an unexpected note. We revisit the dilemma of the daughters of Tzelafchad. We read about this Parshas Pinchas, you recall. A man dies in the wilderness, his name is Tzelafchad, and he has no male descendants. He has 5 children, and they're all females. And the question is raised what to do with his ancestral lands that he will be entitled to, that he will be apportioned in the Holy Land. Every Israelite who left Egypt was entitled to some slice of territory in the land of Canaan that the nation is about to acquire. Now, if they died, these ancestral lands continue and remain in their family, but it goes to their sons. Well, what if someone doesn't have any sons? All they have is daughters. That was the question that was raised by the daughters of a man named Tzelafchad from the tribe of Menashe. 5 daughters posed this question to Moshe. They argued that, well, if a man has sons, great. It stays in the family with the family name, with the family tribe. Fantastic. But what if he has no sons, just daughters? What then? So Moshe filed their request with God, and indeed it was confirmed. In this event, where there are no sons, the daughters inherit the father's ancestral land. That was in chapter 27 of the Book of Numbers. We read it last week. And now, their story is not finished, apparently. The end of the book, the very last chapter of the book, it's the epilogue, part 2 of the drama of the daughters of Tzelafchad, of these 5 sisters. Moshe apparently settled the matter. They inherit the lands, but now some of the other interests in this family, in this tribe, they have a problem with it. And they come to Moshe and they say, listen, it's a great idea to give these lands, part of the tribe of Menashe, to give it to these daughters, but what if they marry men from other tribes? If they marry men from the tribe of Dan, of Judah, Benjamin, not from the tribe of Menashe, well, then at the initial division of the land, we're not going to have all of the lands of Menashe being in the family of Menashe, because those lands will be acquired by the descendants of these women. And as a result, we're going to have an outpost of other tribes amidst the lands of the tribe of Menashe. Now, if these women marry intra-tribally, they only marry from the tribe of Menashe, we have no problem. But of course, a woman is allowed to marry whoever she wants. And if they choose to marry someone outside of the tribe of Menashe, we're not going to initially acquire the land, all of the lands of Menashe. It will go to some other tribe, potentially. That was the dilemma that the elders of the tribe of Menashe brought to Moshe. And Moshe again takes this into consideration and instructs the people that the will of God is that indeed these women can marry whomever they want, but they have to be from the tribe of Menashe. Because when the initial division of the land happens, and each tribe is apportioned their section of the Holy Land, they must initially acquire the entirety of their tribal lands. And therefore, because these women, they could marry out of the tribe, and then the initial division of the land will not be done, meaning that every tribal land will not be entirely acquired by that tribe, members of that tribe. Therefore, they can marry whoever they want, so long as they are from the tribe of Menashe. That's how Moshe addresses the question of the elders of this tribe. And indeed, that's what happens. Chapter 36, verse 11, 3611, great numbers. These 5 daughters of Tzelafchad, these 5 sisters, Machla, Tirzah, Chagla, Milcah, and Noah, they married their cousins from the same tribe. They married their paternal cousins, and these lands, they stayed in the tribe. All is well, and the book ends with this final law being addressed, or this final epilogue to the story being delineated. These are the mitzvos and the statutes that God instructed Moshe to tell the Jewish people in the plains of Moab, opposite the city of Jericho. That is how the book ends. If you think about it, it's kind of strange. We finish up the book by revisiting this story of these 5 sisters, the 5 daughters of Tzelafchad. That's the punchline. That's the crescendo. That's the climax of the book. We have the story that we might have forgotten about. It's chapter 27. It's some time ago, and it's apparently settled, but not quite. We now have the final element of the story. Yes, they get the lands, provided that they marry amongst their own tribe, so that the initial division of the land is done according to the tribes. Doesn't it make more sense to simply wrap up the story of these 5 sisters in Parshas Pinchas when the whole saga of the daughters of Tzelafchad is initially told? Why do we have to revisit it now? This narrative was deliberately split up so that our parting thoughts from this book, the Book of Bamidbar, are with these sisters and the term, so to speak, of the agreement that they acquire the land of their father. And this is the most fitting exclamation of this book. And the question is why? Why are we not told this story in its totality then? Why are we given the end point of this story now as our goodbye to this book? So perhaps we can speculate an idea. There's a very sharp and interesting observation in Rashi's comment to the aforementioned chapter 36, verse 11. If you look at the verse, it talks about how these 5 sisters, these 5 daughters of Tzelafchad, they got married to their cousins, and it lists the 5 women. And it organizes them in a different manner than it does initially. In chapter 36, verse 11, we read how it was Machla, Tirzah, Chagla, Milcah, and Noah. 5 wonderful names, of course. Rashi points out that in the first part of the story, the first installment of the saga of these 5 sisters, the order of the delineation of these 5 women was different. It tells us Machla, Noah, Chagla, Milcah, Tirzah. Why does it switch the order? Why does it alter the order? Now, most of us, we have long forgotten about that story. We forgot about it a long time ago, and certainly we don't remember the order of the delineation of these women. And even if we did remember, we wouldn't accord it so much significance. It's not such a important detail we would imagine. But of course, nothing escapes the scrutiny of Rashi, and he asks the question, why is the order of these sisters changed from chapter 27 to now, the end of the book, chapter 36? And he gives a very interesting answer. He says, well, there are different ways to make a list. If you have a list of 5 people, you could organize it in a variety of ways. You could do it by order of age, by order of intelligence, IQ, accomplishments, height, BMI, income. Lots of different ways that you can organize a list of 5 people. Says Rashi, every time these women are delineated, it's always done by order of wisdom, with the exception of the present verse. Here, it's organized by age. And the reason why the order is altered, it's to tell you that all of these 5 remarkable women were equal. That's what Rashi tells us. Now, it's an interesting Rashi. It's also a bit perplexing because there doesn't seem to be a very consistent logical flow. Every other time, they're organized based upon wisdom. So, chapter 27, verse 1, it lists the 5 women in order of wisdom. Here's the exception. Here, it's organizing them by age. Okay, if that's where Rashi stopped, I'd say, okay, fine. The age is important. Wisdom is important. Sometimes it will organize them by wisdom. Sometimes in order of age. I get it. But then Rashi tells us that teaches us that they were all equal. There's 5 women. One is the wisest and one is relatively the least wise. And that's why they're organized in that order. But this is to tell you that they're equal. What's the logical flow here? If they're typically enumerated in order of wisdom, and here they're enumerated in order of age, how does that in any way lend itself to the statement that they are all equal? That's kind of a strange Rashi. So there's a little bit of a calculation here done in the commentaries on Rashi. The Maharal says, Rashi understands that if not for the fact that they were equal, the Torah would not alter the preferred sequencing. And therefore, sometimes it tells us the order by wisdom, and sometimes by order of age. But the truth is, we could have organized this list in many different ways because they were all equal. Each was great in their own way. And again, the words of the Maharal here explaining Rashi. Each one of these 5 sisters, was greater than the rest of her peers in some way. One of them was the wisest. One of them was the oldest. And one of them was greater in this fashion, or in that fashion, or in that dimension, or in that way. Each had some point of greatness that she excelled in, and therefore they were equal. Each was great in her own way. That's how the Maharal explains this Rashi. I think there's a very deep and maybe a bit surprising point over here. In our religion, there has always been a great emphasis placed upon wisdom. The centrality of knowledge, of learning, of thinking has always been unchallenged amongst our people. Our culture has always been one of study. We've always been the people of the book. Our pastime, our obsession has always been education, studying. That has always been a top priority, perhaps the top priority amongst our people. We've had mandatory schooling and near universal literacy for thousands of years. 2,000 years ago, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel established a system of formalized schooling. You are not allowed, according to Jewish law, to live in a city that does not have robust educational offerings. That was true historically. It's today still true. Jews are universally obsessed with education. And the only difference between now and the historical reality is that historically the quest for knowledge, for learning, for education was almost exclusively Torah learning. And today, sadly, many Jews ignore Torah study. Maybe they accord it some pro forma perfunctory attention, and they focus their educational efforts elsewhere. But the primacy of education, the value of education, it's still ubiquitous amongst our people, as it always has been. The daughters of Tzelafchad are enumerated several times in the Torah. And the order is almost always in order of wisdom. Machla, Noah, Chardla, Milcah, and Tirzah. When we organize things, when we organize our society, our communities, we give priority to wisdom above all. That is the organizing principle of our religion, of our people. But once the Torah alters the order to tell us that the degree of wisdom is not synonymous with a person's standing in the eyes of God, in the eyes of Torah. A person standing in the eyes of God is not the same thing as their degree of wisdom. What actually determines a person's standing in the eyes of God, in the eyes of the ultimate true reality, is how completely did they actualize their potential. So someone who was endowed with great potential for wisdom, they will be judged, well, how much of what they could have become did they become? How much of their potential did they actualize? Others are endowed with other potential. Did someone who had great potential for kindness, for charity, for hospitality, did they actualize that? Someone else that was endowed with great potential for empathy, for caring for others, did they actualize that? Someone who had great potential for character perfection, for ethical refinement, for self-criticism, did they become a most resplendently refined person? What about someone who's jovial, who's jocular, and they could cheer people up? They could infuse the downtrodden with hope, with positivity. Did they actualize that? What about someone who is a great builder, can build communities? Did they actualize that? Did the person with great potential for serving God with all their hearts and with all their soul, did they actualize that? Everyone's different. Everyone is expected to develop themselves in a unique way. And the measure of a person's greatness is completely dependent on how completely they actualize their potential. And the daughters of Tzelafchad are equal. And yes, Machla was the wisest. And most of the time she goes first. And that's the way our communities must be organized, because that is the governing principle of our people. But don't make the mistake, Rashi tells us, the Torah tells us, of thinking that she was the greatest. Greatness is measured by the degree to which someone actualized their potential. And on that barometer, all of these 5 sisters were equal. One was greater in this dimension. One was greater in that dimension. Each one had one area of their persona that was their particular greatness, their particular calling, their particular manifestation of their potential. And all of them unlocked their potential to the same degree. Now, reading this comment in Rashi, it reminded me of a similar comment in the beginning of the book of Exodus. You recall the book of Exodus. We're closer to next year's book of Exodus than we are to this past one. When Moshe and Aaron, siblings, when they're introduced and they're attributed to their Levite origins. Chapter 6, verse 26, we read, Hu Aharonu Moshe. They are Aaron and Moshe. And Rashi observes yet again that sometimes it says Moshe then Aaron, and sometimes it says Aaron then Moshe. Why does it change the order? Why does it alter the sequencing? Says Rashi, there are places that Aaron comes before Moshe, and there are places where Moshe comes before Aaron. Why would the Torah do that? This teaches us that Moshe and Aaron are equal. In the eyes of the Torah, who goes first? Well, Moshe goes sometimes, Aaron goes sometimes, because they're equal in the eyes of the Almighty. Now, that, of course, is very perplexing. What? How can you possibly claim that Moshe and Aaron are equal? Moshe is the humblest man who's ever lived. He's the greatest prophet who's ever lived. He's the greatest leader. He's the one who gave us the Torah. He's the one who ascended to heaven and negotiated and overcame and triumphed over the angels. He was Aaron's superior. How can you claim that they were equal, that they were peers? Now we know the answer. There is no universal metric of a person's greatness. Everyone is measured according to their own unique inborn abilities and opportunities. Moshe and Aaron were different. Each had a different role to play, and each performed, executed on their respective mission to perfection. And again, the way our people are organized, wisdom, it's the number one priority. And therefore, most of the time, Moshe is going to go first. But sometimes the order is reversed to tell us, to remind us that Moshe and Aaron were equal. Each was great in his respective way. Moshe, he was the wisest one. He was the greatest king of all. He was the only giver of Torah. He was the greatest prophet of all. Aaron, well, he's the greatest priest, the high priest of all. He's the peacemaker of great distinction. Each actualized all of their potential. And they're different. But because they each did what the Almighty wanted of them, they are equal. The Rambam tells us something very surprising. Moshe and Aaron, two brothers, they're equal. And it's not an exclusive fraternity. There are other people who can be on that same level. In the Laws of Repentance, chapter 5, law number 2, the Rambam tells us every person can be as righteous as Moshe. So if you are a person and you are listening to my words, the Rambam is telling you, you can also be equal to Moshe and Aaron. By the way, you could also be equal to Jerome, to Yeravam, one of the worst villains of all time. By the barometer of Torah, a person's judged by the degree to which they fulfill their potential. If Moshe did 100% and Aaron did 100%, even though Moshe was much wiser than Aaron, and sometimes, most of the time, Moshe comes first, in the eyes of the Torah, they're equal. And all of us, we can't do 1/10 of 1/1,000,000 of 1% of what Moshe did. But if we do whatever we can do, we are equal, the Rambam tells us, to Moshe and to Aaron. And this is the theme that we talk about a lot here on the Parsha podcast, because it's very critical. In our society, we don't have this individualized yardstick of greatness, of accomplishment. And we're actually not capable of doing this. We cannot measure people's greatness because we don't know what someone's potential is and what it looks like if they do 100%. And that's why we must refrain from judging others. How can you judge unless you actually know what a person's soul looks like, what their abilities look like, what they could become if they deploy 100% of their abilities? Only the Almighty can know that, and therefore only the Almighty can be a judge, a true judge of a person's success and or failure. Moreover, because, we're in a social world, right? We see other people, you have classmates, you got friends, you got colleagues, you have peers. We tend to measure ourselves against our peers. And that can lead to a terrible thing that we call here on the Parsha podcast mediocrity, which is a word that is an insult. It's a 4-letter word for us Jews. We can subsist with just being as good as everyone else. We could be average. But if we realize that you're judged only against your potential, you, all of us, we all have to strive to do our maximum. And we also have to strive to identify what is our unique strengths, what's our unique potential, and we have to work to actualize that. We have 5 sisters here, and one of them was the wisest. But they were all equal. Each was a standout in their own way. Perhaps we can speculate that this is a reason why we're given this part of the narrative of the daughters of Tzelafchad now at the end of the book. How do you wrap up this wonderful book of Bamidbar? In the same way that you started it. The book began with a census. Let's count the Jews. But how do you count Jews? You uplift them. Every person was uplifted. Every person was given prominence. Everyone was given a mission. Everyone was given a responsibility. Everyone was given a role to play. The wise to be wise, the kind to be kind, the hospitable to be hospitable, the empathetic to be empathetic, the servant of God to be the best servant of God, and so on. Everyone has a different soul. Everyone has a completely unique soul. Everyone has a different set of responsibilities and character traits that they must perfect. And each person at the beginning of the book was given an audience with Moshe and Aaron, and were given a window into what their unique soul needs to contribute to this world. Everyone was told what they specifically were tasked with doing. The book begins with the unique individuality and responsibility of every Jew, and this is how it ends. They're all equal. Each one did their own thing. Each one developed their own unique individuality. And when that's done, yes, one's wiser than everyone else, but in the eyes of God, they are equal. There's been a subject that I've been working on the last couple of days. It's a mysterious subject, and I hope to record, please God, a podcast, standalone podcast on this topic. But I think it might be pertinent to our discussion here. So I'll share a little bit of this fascinating subject. The Talmud tells us that there were 7 things that were created before the world was created. 7 things that preceded the creation of the world. And they are, number 1, Torah. Number 2, repentance. Number 3, Gan Eden, paradise. Number 4, Gehenom, purgatory. Number 5, Kisei HaKavod, the throne of glory, whatever that means. Number 6, Beis HaMikdash, the holy temple. And number 7, Shmo Shel Mashiach, the name of Messiah. What is the name of Messiah? What does this even mean? Isn't a name simply an identifier of someone? The name, date of birth, social security number? It's not clear at all what the Talmud even means when it says the name of Messiah was a creation that preceded the world. Now, what's remarkable about this is that the Talmud in the Book of Sanhedrin on page 98b says, well, what is his name? What is the name of Messiah? So it says in the academy of Rabbi Shiloh, they said his name was Shiloh. And in the academy of Rabbi Yanai, they said his name was Yanon, or Yinon, Yanai. And in the academy, meaning the same name as the head of that academy. And in the academy of Chanina, they said his name was Chanina. And some say his name was Menachem. And some say he is the leper of the house of Rabbi Judah the Prince. This is a remarkable and very strange teaching of the Talmud. Each academy argues, and by the way proves from a verse in Scripture, that the name of Messiah matches the name, would you believe it? What a coincidence. It matches the name of the head of their academy. Now, of course, there's all sorts of questions that we have to ponder. What possessed each of the sages to claim that they're Messiah? Or at least their name is the same name as Messiah? And how could it be that Messiah has so many different names? Is one right and one wrong? Should a Messiah have one name? What does it mean that the Messiah is the leper of the house of Rabbi Judah the Prince? It's a mysterious subject that warrants intense investigation. In more modern times, in the great work called Orach Chaim, written by a rabbi named Chaim, written 250 years ago or so, in Parshas Re'eh, in the Book of Devarim, chapter 15, verse 7, he says, I think that the name of Mashiach, it's not Shiloh, it's not Yinon or Yanai, it's not Chanin, it's not Menachem, I think it's Chaim. Oh, not coincidentally, his name is also Chaim. What does this mean? So I heard a novel interpretation. I tried to find the source for it. I couldn't find the source for it. I looked it up using all my techniques. I couldn't find a source for this idea. But it's a powerful idea. Every single person has a little part of this idea called the name of Messiah. And every sage has to realize that what they need to do is to find and uncover that special point of holiness and purity and greatness that they have within them. Find their calling, unearth it, and actualize it, and do what they can do, contribute what they ought to contribute towards this collective name of Messiah. And when every one of us does our part, if every one of us realizes that we have a mission, we have responsibility, our soul is completely unique, and it demands a completely bespoke life mission. And that mission ultimately is about Messiah. It's about perfecting the world. It's about revealing the name of God in the world. When every person realizes that this is their mission, and everyone discovers and identifies and develops and actualizes that name of Messiah, that individualized mission that they have within them, when every person undertakes this mission, executes this mission, then the collective Messiah is revealed. Each one of us has an opportunity and has a mandate to bring towards the perfection of the world. Moshe did it in his way. His, so to speak, name of Messiah was his responsibility. Aaron did it in his way. And they're equal. They both did their part. The 5 sisters, the 5 daughters of Tzelafchad, each, like Moshe and Aaron, they were equal. Each accomplished whatever they need to accomplish. Each did their part towards perfecting the world. And they're equal, like Moshe and Aaron. And we too. We can also be like Moshe and Aaron if we do our part. When we all undertake our individualized sacred mission of fulfilling whatever it is that the Almighty sent us here to do, when we channel and develop and actualize what our unique soul needs to do, then we will witness the perfection of the world, and the collective name of Messiah will be revealed to all. And on that day, God will be one, and his name will be one. May we all be fortunate enough to witness it speedily in our days. I appreciate your listenership, for joining us on this wonderful ride, this Parsha podcast journey through the Book of Bamidbar, through the Book of Numbers. My name is Yaakov Wolbe. You can send me an email, rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. This is the Parsha podcast, but of course, you know, there are many other shows, and I encourage you to go listen to some of the shows. If you want an invitation to the Torch Insider podcast, send me an email. I'll send you an invitation. We're working on some new episodes for the Torch Insider podcast, but again, it is invite only. Send me an email with any questions, comments, or feedback, or anything else you want to say. And I apologize if it takes a while to respond to you. I'm trying to come up with a better system, but we're working on it. But I, please God, will get back to everyone who reached out. rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. Have a wonderful day. A splendid rest of your week. And please God, a safe and secure and uplifting and meaningful and powerful and holy Shabbos for you, for your family, for our people, both in the diaspora and in the Holy Land. And please God, with the help of the Almighty, we'll talk to you again next week. And again, the email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com.